Well, welcome back, everybody, to Tech UK's Digital Ethics Summit and the plenary session of, well, really our closing plenary session for this year's Digital Ethics Summit, where today, as you all know, we've been talking about how do we move forward in 2021 after the discussion yesterday about what are some of the lessons that we need to learn from the year that we've all seen in 2020. Now, very much looking, and the breakouts discussions that we've had this morning, looking at the climate change issue, looking at the economic recovery, and looking at public democracy and engagement. How do we get what we need to do right next year, focused on everyone's minds and everyone's to-do list. So I'm really thrilled to be chairing the closing panel of the session today. Before I introduce my panelists, though, and get going, I just wanted to highlight again that this year Tech UK's Digital Ethics Summit is supporting, and we hope raising, money for the Crisis Christmas Appeal. This is a really important time of year, of course, for everybody, but increasingly hard, of course, for people that are homeless at this time of year. The Crisis Christmas Appeal is a great appeal that really looks to support people in need at this particular time, and particularly around the Christmas period. So we are raising money at the moment, and I'm hoping that in the chat function or somewhere on your screen there is the information on how you could help. And we know that every penny counts. So if you are able to donate to the Crisis Christmas Appeal, I think it's something like £28. Just £28 would give a homeless person or someone in need at Christmas an opportunity that could really change their lives. So if you can help this year, please do, and we'd be extremely, extremely grateful. So thank you. We'll let you know how we're doing with that perhaps at the end of this session. But moving forward in 2021 is the topic of this plenary session. And really, we have brought together a brilliant, stellar panel to really talk about and to get their insights and views on what's going to be important that we need to focus on next year, and how do we get this right. So I'd like to introduce the panel, if I may. Jamie Barnard, General Counsel, Global Marketing and Media at Unilever. Pierre Calzoni, Head of Digital Identity, Data Products, Data Science at Visa. I hope I said that right. Tabitha Golsab, Co-Founder of Cognition X and Chair of the UK's Government's AI Council. Carly Kine, Director of the Ada Lovelace Institute. And Simon Lambert, Chief Learning Officer at Microsoft. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're really, really thrilled to have you part of the summit and part of this really important session where we want to get into a little bit of the detail about what's on top of your agendas and what do you think the issues and areas we really need to work on and focus on to make progress next year, and particularly progress around some of the issues that we've talked about already, I think, through the summit, about operationalizing, putting digital ethics principles into practice and into real action next year. How do we get this right, particularly at a time where we're looking at digitization and digital technologies making more and playing more of a role in our, not just our transformation, but in our recovery, and in terms of what happens next in our post-COVID recovery? How do we prepare and empower people to prepare and retrain perhaps for this new future of work that we're going to see in 2021? And what are the steps we need to do to make sure that everybody is represented, everyone is involved, everyone is part of this really important, for me, step forward? How do we get this right? Now, of course, we're not going to solve all these issues in an hour, but perhaps with our brilliant panel, we're going to get a flavour of what's on each of their minds, what's on each of their to-do lists for 2021. I can't even believe we're saying that, writing a to-do list for 2021, and perhaps have a conversation about, okay, well, if these are some of the issues, then how do we do it? What do we have? The tools and technologies? Do we have the capabilities? Do we have the capacities? Do we have the mechanisms? Do we have the ingredients, perhaps, for what we need to do next? So I'm going to first ask each of the panelists just to introduce themselves, tell everybody a little bit about where they come from, and then we'll kick off with some questions. Remember, you can ask questions throughout the discussion, so please feel free to, and I'll try and weave some of those questions in as we go. But perhaps I can reach out to Simon. Simon, do you just want to explain, well, introduce yourself and explain where you come from and your role at Microsoft. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you, Sue. It's great to be part of this panel. Thank you for the invitation. I am the Microsoft UK Chief Learning Officer, and I am responsible for leading learning culture and skilling strategy in the UK, and driving the execution of skilling and learning for our customers, our partners, employees, and for future generations.
Great to have you with us, Simon. Thank you so much. Carly, over to you.
Thanks, Sue. Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Kind. I'm the director of the Ada Lovelace Institute. Ada is a research institute and deliberative body with a remit to ensure that data and AI work for people and society. And so that means we're interested in the societal implications of new technologies and how the benefits of data and AI can be more equitably distributed. We use things like public deliberation and public engagement methodologies. We translate academic research for policymakers, and we try to engage with industry and practitioners to ensure ethical practice.
Thank you, Carly, and we're thrilled to have Ada as a supporting partner for today's event. So thank you, or the summit as always. So thank you so much. And another supporting partner is Cognition X. Tabitha, it's great to have you with us. Please just, I'm sure everybody knows who you are already, but just introduce yourself if you may.
It's such a pleasure to be back here again. If only I could see everybody. This is one of my favorite summits because it is a time where we do genuinely all get to see each other again just before the end of the year. So happy Christmas, everybody. I am the co-founder of a business called CogX. We run a yearly festival, and most recently have actually turned the platform that we do that into a platform for everybody to run their own events. So that has been quite a last 4 months doing that, but we're quite excited about what that will take us into for next year. I'm also the chair of the government's AI Council, where we have most recently started working on an AI roadmap to support government in their decisions around how they're going to strategically review AI as part of the existing strategies that are happening. So I can talk with both hats on. I might put them on and off as we go through the session. So thank you very much.
No, completely agree. Don't worry, we will all meet again, Tabitha. This will happen. And we really hope it happens, obviously, next year. Some will happen before then, I'm sure. But yes, we'd love to get a bit more in detail on that work as well. Jamie, perhaps just introduce yourself as well. Brilliant to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sue. Thanks to Tech UK as well. Welcome, everybody. I have no idea if I'm talking to 500 or 500 people, but hopefully there's plenty of people out there, some of whom I probably know. My name is Jamie Barnard. I'm a lawyer at Unilever. I lead our global marketing and global media functions, obviously with a specialist legal team. I also lead a lot of work around our digital transformation. I chair the World Federation of Advertising Data Ethics Board and the UK Advertising Association ISBA's Data and Ethics Steering Committee. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So I'll hand over to back to you, Sue.
Oh, brilliant, Jamie. Thank you. It's great to have you. And Pierre.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Pierluigi Culazzo. I'm the head of digital identity, data product, and data science for Visa in Europe. Really happy to be part of the discussion. Thanks for having me. My role essentially is within Visa is to promote and help the company to use always more and data and more insight to make better decisions. But also we work a lot with our partner, with our clients to help them to make better decisions with the usage of data. So interesting 2020, a lot of learning, and really happy to share some of them with all of you.
Well, that's brilliant, and it's great to have you and Visa involved in the summit. So thank you so much for being here. I'm loving the backdrop, by the way. I'm feeling like mine is inferior to yours. But maybe we can start with you, Pierre, in terms of I wanted to kind of get people's reflections. Really, let's kick it off with as we look to 2021. Unbelievable as that is, what are the key issues that you think should be on everyone's radar in the 12 months ahead? So Pierre, maybe start with you.
Okay. Well, I think we all find out that what happened this year very early in the process, and I guess our main objective now is to help the economy to recover, with a particular focus on small businesses. that has been affected really badly, particularly the one that didn't have the capability to, for example, accept other payment rather than cash, and they were just thinking about selling in store. And small businesses, of course, are particularly important for all of us because they represent in Europe more than 50% of the GDP and 2/3 or more of the employee base. So they are the backbone of our economies. This, we learn a lot about how to make them better, and we're going to work to enable them to play in the digital space in a better way. But he also raised another side consideration about resilience going forward, and how do we help all the economy and all the businesses with the usage of data on this side, not only to be more ready to work with more channels, but also to be more resilient for other things to happen in the future. So that's for us is a big theme. The second consideration I would say is, I never saw so many data this year, right? So many individual and businesses, government using science and data to make decisions, which is fantastic from my point of view. It's a sign of progress. But and that's kind of why I just highlight my hypothesis that strong cross-sector partnership and cooperation would be necessary going forward. We raised a couple of points that are always top of my mind and will inform what we're going to do going forward. One is the overall concept of data quality and data integrity. I think is very important for each of us, and I'm sure individually all the organizations are trying to do their best to make sure that the data quality and the data integrity is at the top of their agenda. But I'm looking at this more from an holistic point of view within the ecosystem, with all the players in the society and in industry. We all need to work together to make this better, because data is going to propel innovation, right? And if we're going to use more data and more facts to make decisions, then we better have good quality there, right? And the second bit, which is more and more important, and we are spending a huge amount of energy and time on that, is just not to make sure we're all aware that we don't just focus on what's possible to do with data and what's possible to do with the new technology that are faster and better, etc., but also answering the question about what's the right things to do and what we don't want to do with data, which go beyond legislation and regulation and privacy and it's just like those ethical questions about, okay, we could do these things, but is it really the right things to do? Is it really helping the consumer? Is really what the world is expecting from us? So those are the kind of, helping the economy to recover on one side, and on the other hand, continue to improve our agenda on data quality and overall having the right practice in data ethics and privacy.
Thank you so much, Pierre, for kicking us off. And I think that we'll come on to that in a little bit around digital technology and digitization has such a role to play, particularly in those traditional sectors and industries that perhaps have had to this year or are moving to that. But how do we get that right from an ethics point of view as well? So thank you for kicking us off. I know that's not easy. Jamie, can I come to you next for your kind of reflections on what do you think some of the key issues from your point of view should be on everyone's radar in the next 12 months?
I mean, we can have a 4.5-hour conversation about this, so I'll keep it super brief. So I think probably the issues on most people's radars exist at both ends of the spectrum. I think, honestly, my biggest priority is a very human one. Increasingly understanding how ethics is affecting people's jobs, how they are having to make more difficult choices. Of course, this is quite tribal, so there's not many people, even in an organization as big as us, who are having to make quite complex decisions where choices around data use have a serious ethical potential impact. But for me, getting to the kind of nuts and bolts on a human level is critical. But at the other end of the spectrum, honestly, the biggest issue for me is around digital identifiers. I think the whole internet and the ad-funded internet model is so built upon the need to identify people in some form. And of course, as we approach a cookieless future, the need to do that and the potential loss of ability to do that, I think, will create a whole load of innovation. But we will have to sort out that mess, and hopefully, to coin a Brexit phrase, we'll build back better. So for me, it's actually a really exciting opportunity. I was so looking forward to 2020, so I've had to move all that excitement to 2021. But I think this is a really progressive opportunity. It's not about correcting the mistakes of the past. It's really about rebuilding a better digital society.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamie. And I think that's why we titled this session Moving Forward. Now let's look at what we need to do, and let's think positively in terms of going into next year. So thank you, and I'm sure we'll unpack some of those issues. As you mentioned, bringing the human aspect. Carly, perhaps I can bring you in your role at Ada, and some amazing work that Ada's done this year. So thank you so much on behalf of the community. But what do you think should be on the radar in 2021? Right, it's a big question. I know
it's a big question. Yeah, thank you so much. So I think we're seeing the beginnings of another kind of tech clash, or at the very least, some real concerns about tech and accountability that need to be mitigated or addressed as soon as possible, in order to ensure that we can continue to extract all the benefits from that digital tech brings our lives. Those benefits are clearer than ever, I think, after this year, to Pierre's point about all the ways in which data and tech have been brought to bear on the crisis. And we face, once this crisis is over, an even bigger one around climate change. And I think we're all in agreement that tech and data can really play a role in addressing that. But I do think that there is a gap in public trust and democratic legitimacy around the use of technology. I think that's been exacerbated in some parts this year, including by some missteps around public sector use of algorithmic technology and data, and the contact tracing debate, which had many kind of factors to it. But I think, broadly speaking, we run the risk of that getting worse. And so addressing head on the question of trustworthy technology really, I think, needs to be the priority for 2020 and 2021. And to Sue's point, there is this unknown answer of how do you translate the principles that we're all in agreement on into practice, such that they in turn build public trust and trustworthiness. A big part of that equation and calculation, I think we're learning, is going to be around ethical tech workers. So tech workers themselves being able to drive an ethics agenda within companies. And of course, the recent events at Google with the firing of Timnit Gebru have really brought that to the fore of just how difficult, how fraught the work of ethical tech workers are, and how fundamentally challenging it is to build space for them within tech organizations. I think for me, there's a big question mark about how we build space for those people and enable they're able to run the agendas within companies. I think Jamie was starting to get to some of this. So that I think going into next year, we're going to be constantly having this conversation about what does it mean to be an ethical tech worker in a tech company. I do think there is a role for regulation in building trustworthiness. We've done a lot of public engagement, public deliberation work this year around trying to engage members of the public on what will make you have trust and confidence in new technologies, what makes tech and data trustworthy. Things we continue to hear about is the role of independent oversight and independent scrutiny, the role of regulation, and the need for an evidence base. So really demonstrating to the public why tech and data bring benefits to their lives in a beneficial way. I think there's still a feeling that there's some kind of tech solutionism that runs at least public sector adoption of technology. And so those are some of the things we heard from members of the public this year. I'll stop there, other than just to reiterate Pierre's contribution on data quality. This is something that we at Ada Lovelace Institute fed back to the government in their national data strategy, which published this year or just recently for consultation, which is, it feels like we're moving beyond the era of prioritizing quantity over quality. And there are good ethical reasons to focus on quality rather than quantity, including privacy. But there are just really good practical reasons as well, which is, that's not only going to enable better products to be built, but enable a larger amount of companies to enter the market around data and AI technologies, where at the moment a data intensive industry prioritizes those who have access to the most data. And I'll leave it there.
Oh, thank you, Carly. Fascinating, and some really important issues we touched on yesterday around that the tension between the researching and the community, the companies, within companies, and how that's a tension that perhaps we need to that needs exploring, and also we, in addition to our Tech UK work on a national data strategy, data quality came up very key as an issue as well. Simon, coming to you in terms of your role at Microsoft, what do you see as should be on the key radar, and or perhaps what's on your to-do list for 2021?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot on there, and so but I think certainly it's true. In this year, we've seen a real acceleration of the UK's digital transformation. I think placing remote working and technology solutions sort of at the heart of organisations up and down the country. But I do think, as well as powering this much needed progress, it has thrown some real challenges and shortcomings into sharper focus. I think technology has never been more important or critical in helping our ability to continue to work, to socialise, than it has in the last few months. And it's clear that there's a real onus on science and technologies to support individuals, organisations, and governments in solving the problems of society and our planet. And I think the two big business challenges that really demand our full energy and preparedness is really the impact of COVID and Brexit. And yet both are very different. And nobody quite knows yet how Brexit will play out. And I'm certainly not going to take a view on that today. But what we do know is that companies that are not agile, companies that cannot analyze and use data in real time, companies that don't have a 360-degree view of their business will struggle, and they will are likely to fail. And certainly in the research that we've commissioned in the course of the last few months, we've seen that if companies attract the right skills and have the right kind of leadership, then they can open up billions of pounds of opportunity. Yet we also know that more than 2/3 of the companies that we talk to say that there is a massive skills gap, and that is going to have a major impact on their ability to recover and grow in the current economic climate. So I think the key challenge is to close that skills gap, and quickly. And I think there's been many different data points we can talk to. I think there was a data point from July where like 5 million people were away from work. But as our partners at LinkedIn have identified, I think COVID is creating probably the toughest job market for a generation. And the sad truth is that many jobs will not return as businesses evolve in this digital economy. And for those that do, we certainly foresee a greater demand for digital skills. And navigating this digital skills gap requires a partnership between public, private, non-profit sectors, I think, to address three main challenges: the rapid emergence of AI-powered technologies that are propelling in this new era of automation, the growing need for technological acumen to be able to compete in this very changing commercial landscape, and there is a real threat from a drop-off in employer-based training investments over the past 2 decades. So I think there's some real challenges there, but I do think there is, shoots of, green. I think there's things that we can be positive about. Certainly our research has also identified that leaders are aware that they need to address this skills gap, and they're aware that enhanced technical capabilities and a digitally diverse talent pool are essential to economic recovery. And I also think that the employees are starting to understand how important digital competencies are to their future employability. So I think it's incumbent on all of us actually to work together to close this skills gap. And a skilled UK will be fundamental in an inclusive economic recovery. And I think we need to mitigate the challenges faced by thousands, facing unemployment through this difficult time.
Simon, thank you so much. And there's a lovely connection between the, Pierre talking about increased digitization, the role of digital technologies, Jamie and others talking about, how we operationalize and put these things into practice, and then whether we have the skilled or the people with the right skills to enable us to do that. And love to kind of maybe unpack that a little bit more. But before we do that, Tabitha, what a year, right? It's been a year, but let's look forward and let's look ahead. What's on your, and I saw you were tweeting about this last night, and please, as you watch, please continue to tweet at hashtag digital ethics. But what were some of the things on your mind in terms of what's on your radar for 2021?
So I tweeted asking for advice for how I was going to answer this, and we got some good emojis, and I've kind of taken those and bucketed them into 5 areas. So I think first is new ethically enhancing tech. So actually, the burgeoning safety tech ecosystem, explainable AI research, smaller synthetic data sets. As Jamie said, the tech that we're going to need for a cookieless future. I really think that the company is actually coming out and hopefully making a huge amount of money from actually creating an ecosystem for ethically sound products. So I think that is a new market that I'm hoping will with government backing for safety tech as an ecosystem next year, really take off. The second thing is then new standards and regulation in this post-Brexit world. As Carly said, we need more independent scrutiny. There's going to be GDPR plus, there's going to be competition authorities, there's the safety tech regulation itself. I think there's going to be a lot more discussion there. Third would be the new battlefronts, and that's my pun of the day. Defense is going to definitely be an unavoidable discussion, considering the 16 billion spend from the UK on defense over the next 4 years. The fourth being the new understanding. So as Simon said, the unemployment this year has been the worst it's ever been, and it's only going to get worse, and closing the skills gap is important. In the AI roadmap, we've recommended an online, publicly funded, free at the point of use academy for explaining specifically, in our case, the impact of AI and how to upskill in different walks of the AI ecosystem. So not just being engineers or data scientists, but also marketers, product managers, salespeople, writers, the whole gamut of things that people could be doing in that space. And then finally, and most importantly, as Carly said, addressing head on the trustworthy technology is the most important thing we can do this year. I think we have still too much of a focus on tech, not the people. So the accountability of the human decision-making process. And ultimately, I feel like I've been saying since 2018, like, this is the year that ethics goes mainstream. And I'm just praying that 2021 is really the year for it.
So I think I made that point earlier this morning around perhaps this is the year that the conversation has become more mainstream, because we talked about yesterday, for those of you that weren't able to join us, that issues around data, digital, even algorithms and ethics being touched on yesterday was being discussed around people's dinner tables. People, are marching with placards. This year, perhaps there is more of an understanding. There is more than ever before. Not fully, of course. There's a lot more to do. We can't tick in the box and move on. But there's a lot more of an understanding around these issues that we can perhaps build on going into 2021. But Carly, to your point, that doesn't mean that job done. And we need to. You've done some great work around bringing those voices in, but we need to keep talking about this and keep developing this, because public trust, would you agree, has had perhaps a little bit of a hit this year, and we need to perhaps focus more in 2021 about rebuilding and recreating the public trust and confidence? You think that is key? And I'm interested also, we talked about trust yesterday, and you're talking about trustworthiness. Do you see these as two separate issues, or is it one and the same?
I'll jump on your first question, Sue. I mean, I do agree that it's taken a bit of a hit this year, and I think reflecting on what that has looked like in the UK, I think part of it was, which I think you were alluding to about the placards, was the Ofqual use of algorithm for the A-levels result. And I don't particularly want to go into the details of it, but I think there was clearly some work done there on ethics. It wasn't that it was done in a vacuum, but it provoked a whole bunch of reaction that made us, I think, really realize how difficult it is to do ethical use of data, and just how important it is to involve those affected by those types of systems in the conversation. I can imagine a different outcome if, for example, Ofqual had a kind of council of students advising on how they should go about overcoming what was really a difficult position they were in about trying to resolve the exam results. I think the other thing around COVID has been, at times there has been some prominence of technology as the solution that hasn't really been brought to bear in a way. It kind of raised hopes about maybe apps solving the COVID problem, which in a way have also, I think, reduced public trust, or at least made the public maybe a little more skeptical. So I think those are some of the things that have affected public trust this year. And it is really important, I think, and Tabitha perhaps can expand on this. I've seen her tweeting about it, but it's really important that we do focus not on building trust as the endpoint, because that is not the durable solution, but rather about making the technologies trustworthy to begin with. Now, we're all deep in this conversation of what does make technology trustworthy. I think this idea that having humans accountable in the process is definitely part of it, and we hear that time and time again. We ran this year a Citizens Council on biometrics, looking at the use of facial recognition and other biometrics technologies, and we'll be reporting on that in January. It was such an instructive process, but time and time again, when we ask people what would make you feel confident about the use of public bodies using facial recognition and other biometrics technologies, they came back to things like, I want a person that I can complain to. I want to see an individual responsible for the misuse of this technology. The other thing I think it's important to say around trust is this year has also, and we haven't mentioned it yet, but it's also been the year around which there's been a reckoning on diversity and equity and proper questions of racial justice and structural justice. And that is not only at an intellectual level. I think people have felt that really keenly, and that goes beyond the UK's borders. One of the things we heard, I think that's been brought into sharp relief for two reasons, one of which was the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, and related to that was the disparate and disproportionate impact of COVID on certain communities, particularly people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. We really saw how unfair the impact of this virus has been on people, and how that relates to the structural injustices that they face. It's not that they're biologically predetermined to have disproportionately bad effects, but rather that the structures around them have enabled that to happen. I think that people generally see that, and they see they're really understanding questions of equity more. And when we had this conversation with members of the public about what makes you have trust in technology, they continuously said, we want to be sure that this is going to be good for everyone. We want to be sure that there's not going to be disproportionate impacts of contact tracing apps or facial recognition technology. We want to make sure that there's not kind of disproportionate ill brought to bear on certain communities. So this sense of equity and are we in this together? Is this something that we can all benefit from? Is really important to people.
No, absolutely. And I'd love to bring Pierre into this in terms of bringing it not just from the public, but into organizations and the companies that you are working with. And the role of digital technologies, of course, is huge, not just to help people in their everyday lives, but to help sectors, industries rebuild, recover from COVID, particularly in next year. And as a opportunity to reach customers and to reach people that they're looking to do in a way that perhaps we never could before. And I'd be interested in what you see the role of digital technologies can play, not just in our economic recovery, but perhaps helping to build that trust back up as well. But how do we recognize, or how are you guys addressing some of the ethical issues that the use of these technologies across our economy and society could raise? Because it's a matter of getting both things right? It's a matter of encouraging people to adopt digital technologies, but also do it in a trustworthy way. How are you approaching this issue?
Yeah, well, I guess so. Of course, we've all been increasingly reliant on technology as a result of the pandemic, right? And there's a variety of ways that technology and data science can help to speed up the UK and Europe future economic recovery. So that's clear to everybody. I've mentioned before about supporting small business to go digital. And of course, in that space, we've done a lot of things to launch these resources. For example, we launched the Business Hub that offer tools, advice, and content on how to start, run, and grow a strong digitally enabled business. Of course, we did work to distribute payment terminals to thousands of small businesses across Europe, etc. But apart from that space, there is a huge focus on protecting consumer to prevent fraud. Of course, if just to give you a sense, so Visa as a global technology system that securely and reliably handle on average 500 million transactions per day, which is quite a lot. And we process payment in real time on a global scale in more countries and more currencies than any other payment system. And so in doing that, we apply neural networks, we apply artificial intelligence and sophisticated algorithms that check every single transaction in our network for the potential of a fraud. And those are, very powerful, invisible layer of security that help to keep fraud below 0.1% during the crisis, which is quite remarkable. But then, of course, to your point, there are new way of looking at this, right? So digital ID, for example, is one area of focus at the moment for us, because it can provide a secure and way for consumer to have a better payment experience. We did partner, for example, with a fintech in London that used an hybrid of AI and human expertise to remotely prove a user real identity by assessing whether a photo ID is genuine or not, matching against a selfie. So as you can see, the trend is we're going to use more and more data, more and more technology, and it becomes, to the eyes of the public and to the eyes of everybody, more intrusive. And because more companies are hosting a bigger quantity of information about consumer behavior than ever before. So it's key that we continue to work and without losing sight of our responsibility. And to do that, of course, we have our trust and fairness is paramount, both in terms of the data user and the model outcome, particularly when using AI and machine learning. We have a deep respect for individual privacy and autonomy, but when you use those technology, and I like what Carly was mentioning about diversity and inclusiveness. There's a lot of work we are doing in that space, because we actually, just to give you a sense of how we are addressing the team, we're actually tracking the diversity and inclusion in our data scientists and data engineering group to make sure we enrich the team from that perspective. Why this is so important? Well, for a number of reasons we all know, but if you think about we talk about digital ID, facial recognition, etc. The first algorithm that they were developed in the industry a few years ago, they had a 100% success rate in recognizing a white male. But if you had to ask the same algorithm to recognize a black woman, it would fail 30% of the time. Why is that? Because if you look at who developed this algorithm, basically 99% of the population were white male, and therefore they were training this algorithm to recognize people that they were like them. And so that's really a big problem for us, because there's always been a problem independently on using AI or not. But if you introduce a bias or one of those elements into an algorithm that processes millions of data at speed of light, then you create a very big problem. So one way we are looking at this is actually to increase and track the diversity of our team. So when we build product and solution and we train algorithm, you have a variety of people that look at the outcome in a different way, and then you train it in the right way. And so it essentially, I mean, we can talk about this forever, but I guess it's a mix of processes to make sure that you have the right governance in place, the right privacy by design in place, but also there's a big cultural effort that we all need to make sure that this is one point before, it's not just the role of legal and compliance, it's everybody's role to make sure that the outcome is going to be good enough.
Thank you, Pierre. I'm going to come in a minute to Simon to talk about that kind of, yes, we need to close the skills gap, but how do we do it in a way that is, bringing, diversity into that. But Jamie, can I just come to you perhaps? We talked about, Pierre was talking about more data, more digital. People are using these technologies and embedding these technologies, but then Pierre's starting to talk about how you do it in a operationalizing privacy by design way. And I'm just wondering, perhaps put your chair of the WFA Data Ethics Board hat on. How are you seeing, or are you seeing more brands starting to embed digital or data ethics into what they do on a day-to-day basis? What's your view? Are you think we're making progress in that area?
I mean, yeah, huge progress. I mean, you don't have to spend too long hanging around the Zoom equivalent of the office water cooler to hear people talking about this stuff. I mean, it always shocks me how many new CEOs we're seeing, and these are the kind of the chief ethics officers. You know, for me, having spent 2 years with the WFA, really focusing on the macro challenges in digital society, and trying to influence how we kind of drive forward best practice. Actually, in 2020, I was kind of like Alice in Wonderland and deliberately went down deep into the rabbit hole for me to truly understand where the friction happens inside companies. You know, for me, you know, if we pick up on the diversity point, for example, we need to build not just a culture of ethics in companies, but the kind of, as Simon said, the technical acumen. And I'll give you a good case in point, you know, around diversity. So, you know, it's very normal for brands to run digital optimization on their digital ad content. So they'll run the same piece of content, maybe with slight variations. And the algorithms will put more media behind the content that is performing best. Now, typically, performance metrics are around click-through rates. And this kind of process has been running successfully for years, but now we're looking at the same technologies and thinking perhaps we need an intervention here. Now, why? You know, if it's all working well, why would you need an intervention? Well, you know, just to give an example, if a shampoo brand is looking at running 4 pieces of ad content with different models to see which model is appealing most to the audience, and therefore they put more media behind that. If those models are of different races, and the net effect unintentionally is that the algorithms drive more media to fair-skinned people, and therefore no media behind dark-skinned people, if that's how they're performing, we need to then intervene and actually reconfigure the performance metrics, because our targets are actually around driving inclusiveness and unstereotyping advertising. So, you know, for me, 2021, actually, we have to have one eye on the policy, one eye on working with government, one eye working with the big tech platforms. But actually, the bigger challenge for me is working out who in the organization is having to address some of these difficulties. What interventions do we need? How do we work with our vendors and extended supply network so that we're all trying to solve this stuff together? You know, driving diversity in a digital environment actually requires these kind of interventions. And you know, so for me, that's where the big focus will come next year.
I'd love to come. Oh, go on, Carly.
Can I just say one quick thing on that, Sue? There was a really interesting article recently by Raman Chowdhury at Accenture and some colleagues on when they interviewed 24 chief ethical officers or other types of ethical tech workers. And one of the things they found, just on Jamie's point there, which is about which metrics these people are required to optimize for, and what they're measured, what their own performance is measured against. And the article suggested that even though companies appoint people whose specific remit is to think about these issues, they don't adjust the performance metrics for those same staff members, such that they're still required to meet metrics around growth, productivity, etc., rather than like metrics that are thought about in terms of ethical outcome. And so that feels like it, you know, it's a complex problem to solve, but it's quite a discrete one, and it could potentially result in some immediate benefits.
Yeah, Jamie, you're nodding. Do you think that's something that needs to be on people's high list next year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, people, there are so many challenges at that human level. You know, people are running to targets at the end of the quarter. Well, if you're running at that speed with this much pressure, who's going to raise their hand and say, you know, I'm really concerned about the way we're using data here. I think we need to just pause, spend time understanding the technology, work with our partner, and address what I feel might be an ethical issue. No one is prepared to do that and blow the whistle, but we need to build that psychological safety in organizations so that actually, because otherwise you're just storing risk. You're pushing the disaster, kicking the can down the road. and that's not going to benefit anyone in the long run. So yeah, these are the kind of human issues that really need to be addressed.
So I'll come to Simon next, but then Tamitha, I'd love to come to your kind of views on all of this, and perhaps also how you see or what role or ambition the AI roadmap could play, or role it could play in addressing some of these issues. But Simon, keep coming back to that kind of human issue and the importance of getting diversity and inclusion right in, yes, we need to close the digital skills gap. If we can ever close the digital skills gap, but it's definitely a priority, and we know that at Tech UK. But how do we do this then? What steps do we need to take to close it? But also not just to close it, but make sure that we address some of these real human issues, which is core to what Pierre's talking about, Carly's talking about, Jamie's talking about. But also, how do we do it in a way that is ethical and fair? And to Jamie's point as well, it's not just about bringing people in, but it's helping people develop the skills that they need then to do that, and to do this in an ethical, responsible way, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's a silver bullet that can close this digital skills gap. I think it will take a new era of investment, collaboration, commitment from employers, commitment from employees and government alike. But I do think, as UK businesses look to the future, they need to consider the role that skilling and learning plays in driving their business goals. And with regards to what these kind of skills look like, well, our research that we did in October kind of draw a clear and important distinction between what we're calling consumptive skills and productive skills. Whereas consumptive skills are the skills which allow people to use the digital tools and systems built by others. And productive skills are the skills that enable people to build and create tools and processes for themselves. And in our research, the latter of those has twice the impact on an organization's performance. But the other interesting thing when we talk about what type of skills and how we actually do this is the emergence and importance of data literacy. We talk a lot about digital literacy, but more importantly, data literacy has come out in our research as one of the top of the list of skills when it comes to the highest business impact. And of course, we know that sort of area opens up the door to greater development of technical skills such as cloud, AI, and as well as data governance. So really having a clear understanding of data literacy and how that fits within your organization, I think, is a really important part of kind of addressing this gap. And then I think that the other piece that our research identified, which is really encouraging actually, is the emergence of what we're calling the next generation worker, who are enabled by this sort of low code, no code technologies, supported by more of an empathetic sort of inclusive leadership, have the potential to be both consumptive and productive, and thus leading their organizations into a much more competitive future. And I think that unleashing and harnessing the potential of this next generation worker will be essential, but we also need to be mindful of, how do we bring that next generation worker on in an ethical way? And so I think there's probably three key steps, Sue, when we're looking at kind of identifying the path forward. I think how companies integrate digital into their business is really important. Things like digital literacy, problem solving, information literacy, where can they weave in productive skills into their organization? How can they create an integrated sort of cross digital team to drive skills forward, because it's not just about one group. This next generation worker is really important, but also thinking about sort of non-traditional learning opportunities, like the embracing of programs such as apprenticeships, which really kind of brings people into organizations that perhaps wouldn't have normally gone through the same educational routes as others. And encouraging these next gen workers to sort of hack problems, learn from each other, teach each other. But I think one of the most important things is all about culture, and how organizations need to really think about how they're planning to empower people and really rethink the way they approach talent acquisition, identifying gaps in their organization and look outside the traditional talent pools that perhaps they would normally source people through. Helping people develop professional skills, creativity, communication, collaboration are clearly important. But this cultural piece, this fostering a culture of inclusion, regardless of age, race, background, gender, and also encouraging the idea of experimentation and failure, this growth mindset, which is very much something that Microsoft adopts, this learn it all culture, is something that we're really kind of seeing off the back of some of our research as having a major impact on organizations. And I think we strongly believe at Microsoft in a brighter, fairer and more prosperous future. And it's kind of one of the reasons why we've kind of launched a number of our campaigns around skilling, like Get On 2021, which we announced a couple of weeks back, which is really all about committing to help UK organizations navigate these challenges. But I think it's a combination of things. It's a combination of partnerships across the business world and organizations like yours, Sue, that really need to come together to kind of really identify and think about the right culture we want to set as we're trying to build skills more deeply into the organizations. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet, right? It's as you say, it's a combination of things. And also, if you look at, the breadth of companies and organizations we've got on this panel alone, let alone the whole summit, this has really been, and it always is, right, tab for a coming together of different parts of the community at the end of the year to look at what we've done and what progress we've made, but what more needs to be done. And I'd be interested in everybody's views on my second part of my question, if I may. I'd love to hear a bit more from you in terms of what are your hopes, ambitions. Do you think, given some of the issues that Jamie, Pierre and Carly and Simon have raised, that the AI roadmap will address these issues as much as you can tell us? But then also, I suppose the question for everybody is, okay, so we know the challenges. Do we have in the UK, or do we have as a community the tools that we need to therefore make a difference in 2021?
It's a really good question. I believe that the roadmap will go some way to that, but ultimately the roadmap, which will be published imminently, is more the beginning of the conversation rather than being able to resolve any of that. It has 16 recommendations, but I joke that it's about where to play, not how to play. So we really are trying to point at areas that need to be resolved, but the government have got to own the strategy and they have to own the prioritization themselves. The council is made up of 23 members from all walks of the AI ecosystem, but that is never going to be enough to provide the right amount of information and advice to government. And so what I'm excited about is in the new year, we'll be kicking off the workshops that I had promised the community this time last year, but pandemics, babies, other things got in the way. And we have this unique ability as the AI Council, which a lot of other councils, no other councils have, where we can create working groups where people become part of council for a short amount of time in order to support specific complicated questions that the government need to resolve while they are making decisions about how they're going to position themselves in a strategic way. And so what I'm excited about is, if you look at just the 16 recommendations, each one of those could be unfolded in itself and have full-blown investigations. And the thread that threads through all 16 is that nothing should be done unless it is equitable, ethical, trustworthy, and all that really does come across, with thanks to people from the council who've been able to help us make sure that that's a thread. But equally, it's also 4 of the recommendations are specifically around that. So we have one around bioconfidence and public scrutiny. We have one around diversity and inclusion being a priority. And there's a whole section on data, and that section in itself says you need data and trustworthiness together, holding hands, rather than what I think we've seen in the past is where those 2 conversations can often happen in silos. So we are trying to sort of force every single discussion around innovation to have with it, by design, the discussions that we're having today that can often happen in a quite siloed way, just by the people that care or the people, as Claire was describing, who are kind of given this as their job to do. It has to be everybody's job now. And so we'll be back in touch in the new year with with plans for these workshops, but I'm really hopeful that the roadmap can set a tone whereby these discussions can't happen without everybody in the room thinking this through.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're, as you know, at TechUK, we're very keen to help with that as and when ready. But Jamie, grateful. I saw your digital hand was up. I said to the panel before, I will take digital as well as old school hands. So, Jamie,
I tried both.
I'm bringing you in.
I just want to pick up on Tabitha's point. I think it's a really nice one. I've always maintained that success in this space is a team sport. And for me, the thing that really gives me a lot of hope, and I've actually put my neck on the line and written a piece saying that actually I think digital ethics did go mainstream in 2020. The thing that gives me real hope is, in my role at Unilever and in my role with the WFA, I can see very meaningful change in the tech platforms who are all really committed now. I know there's a huge amount of cynicism with that, but I've had a lot of quite in-depth meetings with them, and they're definitely moving in the right direction. The same with media agencies, parts of the ad tech ecosystem. I can see the DCMS, the ICO. They're all looking quite closely at data ethics, publishers, and so on. So that the whole ecosystem is starting to look at this, and if the consciousness is raised enough, then hopefully there'll be a watershed moment where actually society then starts to say, hang on a minute, and they start driving change with their own, by buying ethically, I suppose. So, I think there's a lot of hope here. I think, as Tabitha said, it's not going to happen in 2021. There's still a long way to go. But I think it will happen. And it's the first time I can say that I think the change will come, but it might take a while.
Well, that's great insight, Jamie, and thank you. And sadly, this always happens, and we always run out of time so quickly. But I'm going to take chairperson's privilege and extend our time slightly, if that's all right with folks, just because I want to capture from each of you and all of you anything that you haven't managed to come in on, but it wrapped within a closing question, if I may. It's Christmas, so it's wrapping. I've wrapped this up as a present to you all. To follow on Jamie's point in terms of perhaps we've approached a watershed moment, I suppose then would be, what is your one, and it's Christmas, I'll allow two, but what is your one kind of main call to action to this community as we look to 2021, where you really would like to say, look, if we all come together and get our hands together, or this is the one key issue we really need to focus on it in 2021. Pierre, let's come to you first, if I may.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think what I notice is that, we are moving in the right direction, and most of the discussion we are having are more on focus on purpose rather than profit, which is great. There are more discussion around sustainability, more discussion about diversity, more discussion about the inclusion, etc. I think my ambition and my desire would be that we're going to be more connected within the industry. So we will all be part of an ecosystem of key stakeholders who help to innovate, deploy, and keep in check AI solution and technology to solve the complex 21st century problems. But we do it just not as looking at our own space, our own companies, but we kind of embrace each other to solve what the biggest problem we need to solve for everybody all together.
It's a great notion. Thank you, Pierre. That's really awesome. Simon, maybe come to you.
Yes, I think that the most successful organizations will be the ones that can both transform technically and culturally, equipping their people with the skills and the knowledge, to become the best asset they have. And I think we should not underestimate the difference and impact that human ingenuity can have. And so I think by investing in their workforce, developing and nurturing the right skills, celebrating constant curiosity and lifelong learning, as core parts of a company culture, I believe that organizations can really kind of get ahead in 2021. So I'm excited about the role that digital skills and learning can have in really shaping that acceleration.
Great, that's great to hear, Simon. And I share that excitement. So I'm looking forward to 2021. Carly, can I ask you? You know, what's your rallying cry for this community as we look to the end of this year and look forward into next year?
Just trying to choose from among a few in my pocket. I think probably it would be, given the audience, I would love to see tech companies appointing and creating space for chief ethical officers or ethical tech champions, and giving them the space and then documenting this so that we all understand how it works, to make decisions on the basis of ethics that go against short-term bottom line, but to Jamie's point, are consistent with a long-term bottom line. That is, you know, really demonstrating when have you had to make, how can we create space for people to help you make tough decisions that might undermine short-term profit for long-term sustainability and long-term ethical impact. Doing that within your organization, but then also documenting it and enabling others to learn from how that is actually working. I think it's one thing to make it happen. It's another thing to publicize it, to make it, you know, a template that others can learn from as well.
Yeah, that's a great issue, Carly, and thank you so much. Jamie, what would be your call?
I'll be super quick because I know we're over time. For me, I'm always terrified that by trying to boil the ocean, we make no transformation at all. So I would just encourage people to focus on where the risk to people is greatest and address that first, and the rest we can deal with in the future.
Thank you, Jamie. And Tabitha, always optimistic person, always looking into the future. So bring us to a close with what would be your kind of call to action, and, you know, are you positive about 2021? You know, put us on a good
hugely positive. I wouldn't survive if I wasn't. And I think that my one call to action for this community specifically is don't give up. The number of times this year where something has happened with, you know, in this ethics debate, and I have felt like it wasn't worth the fight, and then rallied again. I think that is my big recommendation. Also, I walked across the office to bring a prop because you said we were allowed to. So my second call to action is that if you would like to buy a book that will help your friends, family, and non-technical people understand what we're all talking about, How to Talk to Robots is great. Happens to be written by myself, but I thought that it would be the worst thing I could do not to mention it before I say goodbye to everybody. And so thank you for allowing me to do a plug. There was no music that stopped me. Yeah, don't give up. Look forward to seeing everyone in 2021.
Thanks, Tabitha. I did give you two, so that's okay. But look, thank you so much, everybody, for being part of this closing panel and helping to round the summit up in terms of capturing what you saw from this year. And I think really, you know, progress being made. There are steps being taken. You know, there is public engagement happening. We perhaps understand where the issues are. We understand some of the real meaty challenges. I think we said at the end of last year's summit, you know, a lot happening, but we need, at the macro level, we need to get into some of the devil in the detail. And I think this year, for many different reasons, and because of the events of this year, not just COVID, but others, Black Lives Matter movement, the questions around facial recognition technology, you know, the use of data quality, as Pierre was talking about, you know, there's a lot of big meaty issues that we've got into this year that have really, we talked about yesterday about democracy in the age of AI, that have really therefore helped us to perhaps understand some of the challenges and some of the problems that we face, that we know we still have. For example, Simon, the need to close the digital skills gap. But I'm seeing, Jamie, from, you know, your work as well as the WFA, that people are starting to embed this and are really operationalizing this. But it's important in 2021 for us, from what I could take from this conversation, is that we need need to keep talking, we need to keep collaborating, we need to keep working together. Partnership has never been more important to get this right, particularly as Pierre, you were talking about digital transformation is, it's more data, it's more digital. This is the direction of travel. How can we help organizations? How can we all work together to make this the future that we all want in 2021? So on behalf of myself and Tech UK, thank you so much to Simon, to Carly, to Tabitha, to Jamie and Pierre for being an awesome panel to really, I hope you would agree, round up the summit and today. So a virtual rapturous applause to all of you. Thank you so much for being with us, and really a real pleasure. Thank you.